Chapter 9 of the Art of Lullius. Raymond Lully, in these latter times, hath invented a prodigious art, not unlike logic, by means whereof, like another Georgius Leontinus, who was the first that in a public assembly durst put the question what they would have him to discourse of, to enable any person to discourse extempore upon any subject. But to insist farther upon this, it will not be needful now, seeing we have commented sufficiently upon this art already, and the thing itself is so obvious that it will not be necessary to use many words about it. This I am to admonish ye of in general, that this art is of no other use than only to show the pomp and magnificence of wit and learning, and is in no way prevalent for the attaining of sound learning, having in it far more of confidence than efficacy. Chapter 10 of the Art of Memory. Among these arts is to be reckoned the art of memory, which, as Cicero saith, is nothing else but a certain method of teaching and precept, like a thin membrane, consisting of characters, places, and representations, first invented by Simonides Melito and perfected by Metrodorus Septius. But let it be what it will, more certain it is that it can never come to good where there is not a very good natural memory before, which sometimes it perplexes with such monstrous apparitions, that instead of a new memory, it is the cause of madness and frenzies, and overburdening the natural memory with the characters and images of innumerable things and words, it occasions those that are not contented with the bounds of nature to run mad with art. This art, when Simonides or somebody else did offer to Themistocles, he refused it, saying he had more need of forgetfulness than memory. Said he, I remember what I would not, but I cannot forget what I would. As for Metrodorus, Quintilian thus writes concerning him, it was a great piece of ostentation, saith he, to glory rather in his memory by art than in that by nature. Of this art Cicero makes mention in the book of Rhetorics, Quintilian in his Institutions, and Seneca. Among modern authors, Francis Petrarch hath writ something concerning it, together with Marcole, Veronensis, Petrus Ravenus, Hermanus Buscius, and others, though unworthy of a catalogue as being obscure persons. Many there be that at this day profess the same, though they get more infamy and disrepute than gain thereby, being a sort of rascally fellows, that do many times impose upon silly youth, only to draw some small piece of money from them for present subsistence. Lastly, 'tis a childish triumph to boast of a great memory. Besides that, it is a thing of shame and disgrace to make a show of great reading, exposing a great fair of words without doors, when the house within is altogether unfurnished. Chapter 11 of the Mathematics in general. It is now time to discourse of the mathematics, surely the most certain of all the arts, yet all of them chiefly consist in the opinions of their teachers, who have got the most credit, yet in their several opinions have committed sundry errors, which Albumazar among the rest acknowledges, saying that the ancients long after Aristotle's time did not rightly understand the mathematics, and that though all these arts are chiefly invented for the understanding of figures, numbers, and motion, yet are their professors forced to confess that there was never any figure yet found, either according to art or nature, perfectly spherical. And though these arts have been the occasion of little or no heresy in the churches, yet St. Austin saith that they avail nothing at all to salvation, and that they do rather lead men into error, and take men off from the contemplation of true divinity, as St. Hierome observes, are not the sciences of piety. Chapter 13 of Arithmetic. Of these sciences, the first is arithmetic, or the doctrine of numbers, which is indeed the mother of all the rest, not less superstitious than vain, and only valued among merchants for the low and mean benefit of keeping their accounts. It treats of numbers and their divisions, which is even, which is odd, which is evenly odd, and which oddly even, which superfluous, which a fraction, which perfect, which compounded, also of proportion and proportionality and their kinds. Lastly, of geometrical and harmonical numbers, the effects and use of number and their fractions, and the ways and rules of casting accounts. Chapter 13, that was 12, of Geomancy. Arithmetic produces to us geomantic divination, cards, tables, and dice, and whatsoever else in the nature of numerical chances. This geomancy most men do rather make a member of astrology, by reason that their method of judgment is the same, and because of the force and virtue thereof consists not so much in number as in motion, according to the saying of Aristotle. The motion of heaven is perpetual, and is the principle and cause of all inferior motions. Of this geomancy, among the ancients, Haley hath written among our modern authors, Gerard of Cremona, Bartholomeus of Parma, and one Tundinus. I myself have written a geomancy, far different from those before mentioned, though not less superstitious and fallacious, or if you will, I may say, not less crowded with lies. Chapter 14, on the art of dicing. The art of dicing is one of those arts that depends wholly upon chance, wherein he that is most studious and most expert becomes so much the more vile and wicked, while out of covetousness of another man's he bears no reverence to his own patrimony. This is the mother of lies, perjury, thefts, quarrels, injustice, and murder, rightly an invention of evil spirits, which after the overthrow of the Asian Empire was carried away captive into Greece among the spoils of those cities, where afterwards it enslaved and bewitched the conquerors themselves. It is said that Attalus, king of Asia, was the first inventor of that game, having founded by his skill in arithmetic. Among the Romans, it is reported that Claudius the emperor wrote a treatise thereof, he together with Augustus Caesar being great admirers of the game, an exercise most infamous and forbidden by the laws of nations, insomuch that Cobalon the Lacedaemonian, being sent to Corinth for the obtaining a mutual league and friendship between those two cities, when he saw the captains and senators of Corinth playing at dice, returned without doing anything, saying that he would not so much defile the glory of the Spartans, as that it should be said that they had made a league with gamesters. This art was so much disesteemed among the greatest of men formerly, that the king of Parthia is reported to have sent a bale of golden dice to Demetrius on purpose to upbraid his inconstancy. Nowadays it is a game in the greatest request, even among the greatest princes and chief nobility. How do I say? A play, yea, the only wisdom and highest knowledge of men most carefully and wickedly bred up to cheat and cozen. Chapter 15 of the Pythagorean Chants. Neither do I think it fitting to pass by what the Pythagoreans did assert, what others thought, and what Aristotle himself did believe, that there are certain numbers in the elements of letters, from whence some will undertake to tell fortunes by the proper names, the letters whereof being added together, and the names repeated as oft as there be letters, they give the day to him whose name comes to be last reckoned, whether the question be concerning war, quarrel, marriage, life, or any other concernment. And thus they say it was foretold that Patroclus should be killed by Hector, that he should be slain by Achilles, of which Terence makes mention in verse, and how they made use of the letters in their names. These greater numbers, those the less require, he that in doubtful war his chance would know, if the great numbers stop, may safely go. But signs of death the lesser sums prephage, and thus Patroclus fell by Hector's rage. Thus from small sums they did of old foretell how conquering Hector by Achilles fell. Some will undertake to erect horoscopes by these kind of computations, as one Alcandrius, an obscure philosopher said to be the scholar of Aristotle, hath been ready to assert. And Pliny relates that, by the inventions of Pythagoras, there is in the eye a peculiar property to foretell Lemnis and some other mischances. Chapter 16. Yet of arithmetic. But to return to arithmetic, Plato saith that this was first invented by some Cacodemon there with cards and dice, and Lycurgus, that the great lawgiver among the Lacedaemonians expelled it as a most turbulent and factious science out of his commonwealth, for it requires a great deal of idle labor, and diverts men from other more lawful and honest employments, raising great and mischievous quarrels many times about the smallest matters. Hence arises that irreconcilable dispute among arithmeticians whether an even or odd number be most to be preferred, which is the most perfect number between 3, 6, and 10, and whether any number may be properly said to be evenly even, in which matter of so great consequence they say that Euclid is the prince of geometricians, has very much erred. It is a hard matter to say what strange Pythagoreal mysteries, what magic virtues they dream there be in number, though naked and abstracted from things, and with a great deal of presumption aver that the world could not have been created by God had not numbers been instrumental, and that all divine knowledge is contained in numbers, as in a certain rule. From these beginnings the heresies of Marcus, Magus, and Valentinus took their first growth and progression, who presumed that they were able to discover an innumerable company of divine secrets of truth and religion by the dull and weak affiliance of numbers. Some account that Pythagorean inventions among the sacraments with many other ridiculous fancies and idle stories not worth repeating, arithmeticians having nothing to boast of but an insipid, inanimate, and senseless number, though they can think themselves gods because they can only cast a figure or can tell how to reckon. But such honors the musicians will fierce allow them, who think them rather due to their music. Chapter 17 of Music. What's he got to say about music? Let us now discourse a little concerning music, of which among the Grecians Aristoxenus hath written very largely, asserting that music was the soul of man, whose writings Boetius hath translated into Latin. Now, by music, I understand that part of music which relates to the knowledge of sounds and manages either the voice or hand, not that part which teaches the laws and rules of meter and rhythm, more properly termed poesy, which, as Alpharabus's faith saith, is carried on not by any manner of speculation or reason, but with a certain frenzy and madness, as which we have before discoursed. Now that part of music which consists in sound, and is the consort of strings or voices agreeing in sounds inoffensive to the ear, it's more particularly of sounds, intervals, changes of mood, and variety of notes. This the ancients have divided into enharmonic, chromatic, and diatonic. The first, that is to say, the enharmonic, by reason of its profound abstruseness, the impossibility of discovery, they altogether laid aside. The second, by reason of its wanton measures, they condemned and utterly refuted. The last, as agreeing best with the composition of the world, they only admitted. Others there are who have distinguished the moods of music as derived from sundry countries, for whose particular genius they seemed at first to have been more properly contrived, of which there are three named, the Phrygian, the Lydian, and the Doric, which, according to the opinion of Polemestres and Saccades, a native of Argos, is said to be of greatest antiquity. To these, Sappho, the Lesbian, added a fourth, termed the Mixolydian, of which others take Tersander, others Pythoclides the piper to have been the authors, though Lysias made Lamprocles the Athenian inventor thereof. These four moods pass current under the seal of authority. This whole structure or fabric they call encyclopedia, or the sphere of sciences, as if music did comprehend all sciences, seeing, as Plato observes in his first book of laws, that music cannot be understood without the knowledge of all the other sciences. Among these four moods, they approve not of the Phrygian, for that it distracts and ravishes the mind. Therefore, Porphyrius gives it the name of barbarous, as exciting and stirring up men to fury and battle. Others give it the appellation of Bacchic, furious, impetuous, turbulent, which being generally used in anapaestics were those charms which, as we read, formerly incited the Lacedaemonians and Cretans to war. With this sort of harmony, Timotheus incited King Alexander to arms, and Boetius relates how Tauromenicians, a young man, was moved by sound of this Phrygian harmony to burn a house where he knew a certain courtesan lay concealed. The Lydian mood Plato refuses as too sharp and shrill, and coming short of the modesty of the Dorian, being most proper for lamentation, though, as others will have it, most agreeable to merry and jolly dispositions. This made the Lydians, a merry and jocund people, to be very much affected with that sort of music, which afterward the Tuscans, the offspring of the Lydians, were wont to make use of in their dancing. The Doric, as being more grave, honest, and every way modest, consequently most congruous and agreeable to the most serious affections of the mind, and graver gestures of the body. They preferred above all the rest, and was therefore held in great esteem among the Cretans, Lacedaemonians, and Arcadians. Agamemnon, being to go to the Trojan war, left behind him at home a Doric musician, to the end he might by his grave, spondaic songs preserve the chastity of his wife Clytemnestra, so that it was impossible for Aegisthus to obtain his desires of her until he had first murdered the said musician. As for the Mixolydian, only fit for tragedies, and to move pity and compassion, they were of opinion that it had a great power either to quicken or put a damp upon the spirits, either to raise or depress the affection, and that it had an absolute dominion over grief and sadness. To these four moods, some there are who have added others, which they call collateral, the Hypodorian, the Hypolydian, and the Hypophrygian. To the end there might be 7 correspondent to the number of the planets, to all which Ptolemy adds an 8th, the Hypermixolydian, the sharpest and shrillest of all. But Lucius Apulcius only names 5, the Aeolian, Hyastian, Varian, shrill Lydian, warlike Phrygian, and religious Doric. Marcian, according to the tradition of Aristoxenus, numbers 5 principal moods and 10 collateral. Now, though they confess this art to contain very much of sweetness and delight, yet the common opinion is verified by general experience that music is an art professed only by men of depraved and loose inclinations, who neither know when to begin nor when to make an end, as it is reported of Archibabius the fiddler, to whom they were wont to give more money to leave off than to continue to play. Of which impertinent musicians we find this character in Horace. Among their friends all singers have this vice, that beg to sing. None are more coy or nice. Unbid they'll never cease. Music has always been a vagrant, wandering up and down after sordid hire, an art which no grave, modest, chaste, magnanimous, and truly valiant person ever professed. Therefore the Greeks generally term them Father Bacchus's artificers, bacchanal, or lewd artists, generally of loose behavior, incontinent in their lives, and for the most part in great poverty and want, which is not only the mother but nurse of vice. The kings of the Medes and Persians reckoned musicians in the number of their jesters, parasites, and players, pleasing themselves with their songs but contemning their persons. And the wife, Antisthenes, hearing that one Ismenias kept an incomparable musician in his house, quoth he is a bad man, for he would not be a fiddler if he were honest, for that is not an art becoming a good and virtuous man, but only the lazy epicure. This made Scipio, Emilius, and Cato utterly to despise this science, as being contrary to the majesty of the Roman manners. Therefore were Augustus and Nero so much condemned for giving their minds so much to music. 'Tis true, Augustus being reprehended gave it over, but Nero, more eagerly pursuing it, was for that cause hated and derided. King Philip, when he heard that his son had sung very finely at a certain entertainment, burst into a passion, reproaching him in these words: "Art thou not ashamed to sing handsomely? For it is enough that a prince will vouchsafe to be present while others sing." Jupiter is never said to sing or play on the harp by any one of the poets, but the learned Pallas is said to hate all manner of piping. In Homer we read of a harper to whom Alcyones and Ulysses willingly lent their ears. In Virgil, Iopus both sings and plays, while Dido and Aeneas give attention. Yet, when Alexander the Great was singing, his schoolmaster Antigonus brake his harp and threw it away, telling him it was his business to reign and not to sing. The Egyptians also, as Diodorus witnesseth, forbade the use of music to their youth, as rendering them luxurious and effeminate. And Ephorus, according to Polybius, condemns it as an art invented only to delude and deceive men. And indeed, what is more unprofitable, more contemptible, more to be avoided than the society of these fiddlers, singers, and other kinds of musicians, who with so many sorts of songs, dialogues, catches, and roundclays, more chattering than rooks or daws, do but like sirens bewitch and corrupt the well-disposed minds of men with their lascivious sound of ribaldry and debauchery. Therefore, the mothers of the Cyclones persecuted Orpheus even to hell for effeminating their males with his charming harmony. And if there be any authority in fables, we find that though Argus had his head guarded with 100 eyes, yet they were all charmed asleep with the sound of one single pipe. It is true that from hence the musicians take occasion to extol themselves far above the rhetoricians, for that their art has a greater power to move the passions and affection, and to such a height of madness that they are carried, as to affirm that the heavens themselves do sing, not that they were ever heard so to do, but only as their drunken dreams and imaginations prompt them to believe. Neither was there ever any musician there that ever descended from heaven who could ever pretend to know all the consonances of sound, or the true reason of proportions. Only they say that it is a most complete art, and comprehends all other sciences, nor can be thoroughly understood by anyone not universally learned. Yea, they attribute it to the virtue of divination, and that thereby men may make a judgment of the habits of the body, affections of the mind, and manners of men. They say, moreover, that there is no end of this art, and that every day produces new discoveries therein, which, in another sense, Anaxylus wittily hints that music is like Libya, which every year produces some new sort of venomous creature or other. Athanasius, therefore, by reason of its vanity, exiles it from the church. It is true, St. Ambrose, more delighting in pomp and ceremony, instituted the use of singing and playing in churches, but St. Austin, in the mean betwixt both, makes a great doubt of the lawfulness thereof in his Confessions. Chapter 8, I think it's actually 18, of dancing and balls. To music, dancing is a kind of appendant, most grateful to children and youthful lovers, a thing which they learn with great care and practice all night long, most punctually observing the time of the music, and that the measures of their feet and capering steps may exactly answer the time of the fiddles, laboring to perform the silliest and maddest thing in the world, with the greatest knowledge and activity their bodies and souls will admit. A thing which, were it not set off with music, would appear the greatest vanity of vanities, the rudest, most nonsensical, and ridiculous fight in the world. This is that which lets loose the reins of pride, the friend of wickedness, the food and nourishment of the lust, the bane and enemy of chastity, and unworthy so much as the thought of any honest person. At these balls, saith Petrarch, many a grave matron hath lost her long-preserved honour. Many an unhappy virgin there hath learnt what she had better never had known. From thence many have returned home polluted, many half overcome, but never anyone more virtuous than they were before. Yet to have some of the Grecian writers highly praise this idle art as the worst and most pernicious things ever never want their extollers, and have deduced the pedigree of dancing and balls even from the heavens themselves, comparing the steps of dancing to the motion of the stars, that seem in their harmonical order to imitate a kind of dancing motion, which they began so soon as the world was created. Others say it was an invention of the satyrs. By the help of this art, Bacchus is said to have softened and overcome the Tyrannese, Indians, and Lydians, most warlike nations, whence dancing was by them made use of in their religious rites, and the exercise thereof by the goddess Rhea commanded the Corybants in Phrygia, and the Curetes in Crete. And in Delos there was no sacred ceremony performed without dancing, no festivals, sacred or civil, celebrated, where dancing was left out. The Brahmins also, among the Indians, morning and evening with their faces toward the sun, dancing, were wont to worship his beams. Likewise, among the Ethiopians, Thracians, and Scythians, dancing was used in all their religious ceremonies, as being first initiated by Orpheus and Musaeus, the best dancers of their times. There were also among the Romans the Salian priests, whose duty it was to dance about in honor of Mars. The Lacedaemonians, the bravest people of Greece, having learnt the custom of dancing from Castor and Pollux, in all their feats and public ceremonies used dancing. In Thessaly it was held in such veneration that the commanders and chief leaders were honored with the title of foremost dancers. Socrates also, by the oracle judged to be the wisest of men then living, was not ashamed to learn to dance when he was far stricken in years, and not only so, but highly extolled the same art, and reckoned it among the most serious parts of education, and was esteemed by him a thing of that gravity as could hardly be expressed, and entered in the world together with the love of the gods. But what wonder it should be so highly honored among the Grecian philosophers, who are not ashamed to make the gods themselves the patrons of adultery, rapes, patricides, and indeed of all manner of villainies. Many have written treatises of dancing, wherein they set forth all the several sorts and measures thereof, expounding their several names, and who were the particular authors and inventors of each, so that I need proceed no further therein. But the ancient Romans, men ever famous for their gravity and wisdom, condemned all manner of dancing. Neither was any woman among them accounted virtuous that was given to dance. Therefore Sallust reproaches Sempronia that she sang and danced more exquisitely than was convenient for an honest woman. Nor are Gabinus and Marcus Caelius, men in consular dignity, less blamed for their overgreat skill in dancing, and Marcus Cato objected it as a crime to Lucius Murena that he had been seen to dance in Asia, whose cause when Cicero took in hand to defend, he durst not justify the act as well done, but utterly dismissed the fact, saying that no sober man ever danced either alone or so much as at a moderate banquet, unless he were mad, dancing being always the companion and attendant upon immoderate feasts and inordinate plays. We must therefore necessarily conclude that dancing brings up the rear of all vices, neither is it hard to tell what evils come many times to pass through idle discourse and toying. At such time as youth in the heat of dancing uses antic gestures and makes a hideous stamping noise, skipping to wanton tunes, and the sound of obscene airs, then are virgins and matrons handled with shameless hands, tempted with immodest kisses and lustful embraces. Then what nature hides and modesty veils, wantonness discovers, and civil sport becomes the pretense of wickedness. An exercise not sprung from heaven, but invented by the devil in defiance of divinity, so that when the children of Israel had erected themselves a calf in the wilderness, they sacrificed thereto, eating and drinking, and afterwards rising up to play, they fell to singing and dancing. Thank you for letting me read to you. Please check the description for where to buy my art, where to watch my movie, and where to send me a one-time donation, and I will see you tomorrow.